Hey, Pez, just before this is definitely
just a quick bit of it.
Yeah, exactly. This definitely is not one to sweep over in any sort of way. But one of the biggest stories coming out of the UK, that was Tahar Rashim from Wisden who broke this story. But the article that I'm referring to now is actually from George Dobell, who wrote an article for ESPN Crick Info, which was titled "Azim Rafiq was on brink of suicide after experiencing racism at Yorkshire." And the article goes on to state that Rafiq, a former England under-19 and Yorkshire captain, says he lost faith in humanity after his reports of racist behaviour were ignored by the club. Originally seen as a symbol of the club's desire to embrace the ethnic diversity of the urban areas around its Leeds home, Rafiq came to believe that institutional racism at the club is worse than it's ever been. Now aged 29 and pursuing a career away from the game, Rafiq has chosen to speak out in the hope that he can prevent anyone else feeling the same again. I know how close I was to committing suicide during my time at Yorkshire, he tells ESPN Crick Info. I was living my family's dream as a professional cricketer, but inside I was dying. I was dreading going to work. I was in pain every day. There were times I did things to try and fit in as a Muslim. I now look back on and regret. I'm not proud of it at all. Now, there's obviously there's obviously a number of effects after this, but one of them that's come out, which I suppose impacts Australian listeners more than anything else, is Lehman was appointed to be the 100 coach, the team of the what's the name of the Yorkshire 100 team?
I couldn't tell you.
So Lehman was going to be the coach of that team, and that appointment is under scrutiny in the wake of these allegations, because in 2003, Lehman was suspended for 5 ODIs using racially abusive language following his dismissal in a game against Sri Lanka. Now, while Lehman, previously a hugely successful overseas player with Yorkshire, has expressed remorse over the incident, he has described it as the biggest mistake of his life. That history could well come back to haunt him. Among Lehman's assistant coaches in the 100 is Yorkshire's head coach Andrew Gale. He was banned for 4 games in 2015 for improper conduct after telling the South African batsman Ashwell Prince to, and I quote, "fuck off back to your own country, you coalpack fucker." That's all the nuts and bolts and the facts of this case from originally broken by Tahir Rashim from Wisden, but also George Dobell from ESPN Crick Info as well. So, Pez, institutional racism. It's, as I said before, definitely not one to sweep over. This is quite an alarming and shocking, it's more than an allegation. If you can find Rafiq speaking about this on Sky News, you can find that on Twitter if you care to research it, and it's horrendously disturbing hearing someone go through that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. That's exactly the reaction that I think most people would have. I know some haven't. There was a dude, Roger Pugh, who's the chairman of ECB Yorkshire South Premier League, who described Rafiq in the wake of this as discourteous and disrespectful.
Oh, yeah. Said
he wasn't in a position to comment on Rafiq's allegation, but he found Rafiq very difficult to deal with. Included a biblical quote as well. He said, several of our umpires and one of our clubs also had problems with him in 2016 when he was back with Yorkshire Cricket. I wrote to the club to draw attention to his behaviour, a step not taken lightly. I'm not a religious man, but a biblical quote seems to be apt here. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And, it just reminds you that, that can get in the bin, obviously, Roger.
Straight in the bin. Straight in the bin.
These people are still among us. And I guess with this incident, you ask, what do we learn from it? When you hear about Rafiq, you think, I'm listening to a story from history here. This sort of stuff you read in a history book, something when people were really racist, with the sort of enlightenment we think we have now, is wasn't present. But then you have to learn that we don't live in a post-racist world. This stuff is a continuation where we're still in it, in so many contexts. In Australia, please, this isn't an Australia-England thing. Racism can rear its head explicitly, it can rear its head in disguise, it can unintentionally reveal itself. Too many blokes, in cricket, let's face it, usually blokes, believe that they can be the arbiters of what's racist and what's not when they say something and they say, I didn't mean it, so it absolves them. But it's possible to be racist without, that being your intention. I think that it's easy to grandstand to white blokes in Melbourne, but there needs to be, and we will, there needs to be more listening. There needs to be more consistent, considered leadership. All this stuff comes through fear. You can address it with love or with zealotry or both. I think it's a US example, but I love how Greg Popovich, the Spurs coach, he makes a point all the time of celebrating Paddy Mills, Indigenous Australian, his story, and educating people that way. And, I'm just minded it reminds me of a quote that, it's almost impossible to hate anyone whose story you know, and there needs to be more of that in cricket. It's still too narrow. There are still too many, still too many people excluded, and it's all done in an intangible way. And clearly, that's the case at Yorkshire here as well. But so many places in Australia and at different clubs also.
Absolutely right, mate. And I openly encourage everyone to go and see what Rafiq was speaking about here, because when he told his story. I'd not heard of it before. I literally listened to it last night, what he was saying. And the words that he was saying and the kind of racism that he experienced, I immediately recognised. So I was telling you before. But
as in you've seen stuff like that happen to others.
I've seen it. And it's something that's really important for us specifically to talk about it because, as you know, Pez, we speak to many, many young people through this show and they'll still be playing right now. And this stuff will still be going on because I saw it around about 15 years ago when I was playing. I think I was between 19, 20, 21, something like that. And I was playing grade cricket in Sydney. And a guy that I was playing with during a lunch break, it was one day game, he was from Sri Lankan heritage. And he spoke to me and he was just like, really like heart to heart. And he said, I really don't like the way some of the guys talk about me or make jokes about me. And what Rafiq was saying in his thing was like it was often disguised as banter.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what I recognised. And that day when this guy told me about his experiences that was happening in the team that I was playing on that day that I was playing, and he was like, it obviously really affected him. And I didn't know what to say. I could say that I was young and I was 19, 20, 21, something like that. And all I did was listen. That's really what I didn't go and tell anyone at the club. I didn't tell the guys to stop doing it. I didn't do anything. And in hindsight, that was the completely wrong thing to do. Now, if that was happening, I would absolutely tell those guys to stop doing it or report to the club or have more of an open conversation, which is maybe one of the good things now that you might feel like the structures are in place that you actually can do that, like have those conversations. Maybe. But, that's the thing that, when Rafiq was speaking, I immediately recognised it because I've seen it before and it's happened, I reckon every single club cricketer in Australia has seen it in some way. They either play with someone who is from an ethnic minority or they're playing against someone and you hear the comments. You see it all the time. And one of the biggest regrets that I think about now is I didn't do anything, which is exactly what Rafiq was saying at the time. So there's lots of young people playing out there. There's old people who are still playing and they're going to say it all the time. You have to say something if it's the person who's saying the racist thing, if it's supporting the person who is being racially abused, you have to go through the authorities and you have to make a change. It's the only way this thing ever goes away. Well, it doesn't go away, but communication is everything, I think.
All right.